Okay, so now we're going to talk about what if it is a metal, but it's a variable charge metal. So remember, we're still talking about ionic, so it's still a metal cation and a non-metal anion. The metal is still written first, so metal, then the non-metal. Okay, so same order as before, but the difference here is that I have to have my charge in Roman numerals. So remember that the metal cation charge is determined from the anion charge. So I kind of want to do these a little bit differently because I have to look at him first and then I can answer what his charge is going to be. Alright, so like I said, the best way to figure these out is to practice. So let's practice writing the name of this guy. So I wrote out the steps for you. So I ask you on a test or something like that, name this guy. So we have to do the exact same steps before. Let's look. I have A, U, and S. So I have two elements. So there's no polyatomic ions. You see how the process is going to be the same. Then I got to figure out what is this guy. Okay? So I go over here and I say AU. Where's AU? AU's right here. Okay? So he's a metal, but he's a transition metal. Okay? So transition metal. So he's a metal, so now I know, okay, he's a metal, so it's an ionic compound. And since he's a transition metal, then that means that he's got a variant charge. Okay, so he's a metal. So since he's a metal, that's how I know that this whole thing is ionic. So that's how I know I have to use these ionic rules. And because he's a transition metal, I know that he's the variant. Okay? So that means that I can't just name him straight out based on him being AU. That means that I'm going to have to figure out what his charge is before I can name him. So then I can't go any further. I need to then go to the S to figure out what the S is. Okay? Because how I name the metal is now going to be dependent on the S. So now I kind of start at the back and move forward. So the S should be, I think I closed it on accident. Hold on. Yep, I closed it on accident. I'm trying to open it up, but it closed on me. There we go. All right, let me go back to the PowerPoint. All right, cool. So our S here, non-metal, and it's got a -2 charge. That's going to be important because to be able to figure out my metal, I have to know the non-metal. So sulfur, -2 charge. All right. Whoops. So I have sulfur and he's a -2 charge. So now I have that. Now I need to figure out what is the total negative charge. Because I have 3 sulfurs. So there's 3 S's, 3 sulfurs because of the subscript. Each one of them is a -2. So I have a total of a -6. Let me write sulfur so that doesn't look like a 5. So I have a total of a -6 charge. So my whole right side here is a -6. Now, if you look at the way this is written AU2S3. There's no kind of superscript right here. So we can assume that it's neutral. If it wasn't, it would have like a plus up here, or it would have a minus up here. But since it has no charge up there, we know it's neutral. So since it's neutral, whenever the negative is, the total positive charge has to just be the opposite. Okay, so it's got to be a +6. Now I want to figure out what is the charge on each one of my AUs. So I have 2 AUs. So if the total is supposed to be a +6, I divide that total by each one of them, and so I figure out that each AU is going to be a +3. So now I know the charge on my variant metal. Okay? So you got to use the non-metal to figure out the total charge. If it's neutral, the total positive is the same. And then if I have more than one of the metals, I have to divide my total charge to figure out how much each one is. So each one one of those is a plus 3. Okay? So each one of those is a plus 3. So now I can name it. So what is AU? So AU is gold. Then I have to put the 3 in Roman numerals. And then sulfur. And so since it's sulfur, I drop the ending and add sulfide. So gold 3, sulfide. All right, let's do another example. So same process. You're going to see that the thought process is the same every time you get a problem. How many elements? There's 2 elements. So there's no polyatomic ion. Figure out what this first guy is. Cu. So let me find him. Here's Cu. He's a transition metal. So since he's Cu, that tells me he's a metal. Okay, so now I know it's an ionic compound, and since he's a transition metal, I know it's a variant. A variable one. So he's a metal. So now I know this whole thing is going to be ionic. And because he's a transition metal, I know that it's a variant or variable metal. So since he's a variant, I gotta then figure out who he's with. So this is F. So I go over here and I say, okay, where's F? Right here. And he's a -1. So I gotta figure that out. Okay, so I got Cu, I got F. Okay, so I gotta figure this out. So F is a -1. Okay, so how many F's do I have? I have 2 -1 F's. So that means that my total negative is a -2. Since it is a neutral compound, okay, since it's a neutral compound, then I have a total of a +2. Then I said, well, how many Cus do I have? I only have 1 Cu, so that means that Cu is my +2. So this is figuring out what the anion is, figuring out his charge, the total negative, what's the total positive, and then what would it be on that metal. This is everything we did in the last slide, but just in one little step. So now we name the cation. So what is Cu? Cu is copper, but since he's variant, I have to put that 2 there. The anion is fluorine. Whoops. Drop the ending and he becomes fluoride. Put it together and you get copper 2 fluoride. All right, copper 2 fluoride. So we're gonna stop here. The next slide is a bunch more practice. So I want you to try these practice before you watch the next lecture video to see if you're able to figure out how to work these.